your indignation at that is to support one who has spoken like you wanted them to speak. But I'm in this race for many reasons. One reason is that the liberals, and many of them in this race for the presidency, have voted to disarm this country. And this country today has lost its superior position, and we are number 2. And the President's own Blue Ribbon Panel report has said that we have slipped to number 2 behind the Soviet Union. And Mr. Laird said 2 days ago they've developed some new weapons and some new spacecraft that we didn't know about. And all the time, the average man who they wouldn't listen to was telling them, for goodness sake, keep us strong. The average man was saying 5 or 6 years ago, win the war in Vietnam and get our young folks back here. But no, those liberals who have taken over because they make the most noise, but they don't represent the most folks, want to unilaterally disarm this country. That means disarm by ourselves. And they say the Soviet Union and the Red Chinese will follow suit. I want to have peace in the world. I was in World War II, and I was a combat veteran. But my friends, the only way that we can have peace in this country and in this world and prevent World War III is to be so strong that no one will want to shoot with us, but they'll always want to talk with us. And not only is your personal security involved, but the national existence of our country is involved. And therefore, when you vote for me, you'll vote for someone who has said it all the time, that let us be number 1. Let us not decrease our armed services, our Navy, and our Air Force, and our nuclear defensive and offensive capabilities. All of us want peace. All of us want genuine disarmament. But until the time comes that we can be sure that the other nations will do what they say they will do, and they have never in the past kept a single agreement they have made on the matter of nuclear testing or otherwise, we must trust no one, but we must be number 1. So vote on March the 14th. You will be telling them, the National Democratic Party, cut out this stuff of talking about unilateral disarming, and the rest will follow suit. And I want to say to any young theoretician or old theoretician, whether he be on a college campus or where, who tells folks that if we will disarm, the rest of them will disarm, he ought to have his head bored for the hollow horn, because there's something wrong with it. My friends, another issue in this campaign is the tax structure, and I want you to listen to this. I've been saying it all these years. The average middle-class citizen is taxed to death. He cannot get ahead because inflation and high taxes make it hardly possible for him to live from one week to the next. And yet in this country, we have $200 billion of tax-exempt income and wealth owned by the multi-billion-dollar foundations and $155 billion of property in competition with other businesses owned by churches, such as skyscrapers, such as industries, such as hotels and motels and shopping centers. And did you know they don't pay taxes on that income? Because the law gives them at the federal level a tax exemption on it. And these billions of dollars of funds in the foundations like the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Mellons and the Carnegies, yes, they are tax exempt. And the endowment funds that run into the billions of dollars are tax exempt. And that makes every working man and businessman and farmer in Florida pay double the taxes they would pay if they taxed them. And when you vote for me on March 14th, you will be telling the National Democratic Party, we want that crowd to pay taxes like we've been paying taxes here in the state of Florida. Yes, these foundations with their tax exemptions are always telling us how to cure the poverty problem. Well, they don't know what poverty is. They were raised with silver spoons in their mouth. They've never got up on a coal boarding and put the foot on a Congolian rug with a fire in a fireplace. They've never used a lamplight as those my age have or had outdoor plumbing. They don't know what it is. I know what it is, and most Southerners do. And I can see some of them over skiing in Switzerland 5 or 6 days, the other day. They're worried about the poor. I am too. But I can tell you one thing, when they advocate something for one of these programs that goes to waste, it taxes you. It doesn't tax them because their money is tax exempt. And it's just not fair and it's not right. And the other day at the Southern Governors Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, I introduced the resolution to ask the Congress of the United States to lower the taxes on every individual and business in this country and remove the tax-exempt status of those that I mentioned a moment ago. And it passed unanimously because they are now waking up that that's what you want. That's an issue in this campaign. And if any other candidate from the Senate comes down and tells you he's for that, why don't you ask him, well, why didn't you do something about it when you were in the Senate of the United States? Why didn't you do something then? Yes, they're talking about now, they want a new tax to replace property taxes. Property taxes are too high. But we can close the loopholes in the present property tax system, cut down some administrative costs, cut down some welfare money and foreign aid. We don't need any new taxes. All we need to do is to close the loopholes in the present tax system. And I want to give you an example of what I would say if I were the president. In Alabama, we have the lowest property taxes in the nation. On a $10,000 home, you pay an average of $40 a year. On a $20,000 home, $70. On a $30,000 home, about $110. And on a $40,000 home, about $150. And my friends, we don't penalize people for owning property and businesses in our state. But when they say we ought to have another tax to replace some other tax, I say we ought to just close up the loopholes in the present tax system that's out of kilter in this country. And I was told by a governor the other day from one of the southern states, he said they are opening an office in Washington, D.C., the foundations are, to lobby to keep their exemption because you've been raising so much sand over the country about that tax-exempt status. And when we talk about spending money, they want to cut out on the space program. Well, the space program is tied to national defense, and everybody knows that. And the side effects of medical benefits and otherwise that come. But you know where they can cut down? I went to Washington so many times as governor of my state, and when you get to Washington, buildings as far as the eye can see, thousands upon thousands of people toting briefcases making $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and they don't know what they're there for themselves except to draw their check. They run over one another. All they do is look after one another. That's about all they have to do. And my friends, if you don't believe it, you just go up there. They can cut 10% off the administrative costs. Because as a governor, I've seen the departments ask the governor to put in the budget $200 million more. We just can't operate. Well, we didn't give it to them, and they operated right on. So operated right on. You know, the other day in Montgomery when we were writing a budget, one institution came, and this is just like these federal folks, just want more money in Washington, just to hire more people. We have to have $6 million more, and we're going to have to close our doors. We're going to lose all our professors. I said, well, please don't do that. We put $500,000 in the budget, and then we cut it to $200,000. And they came in and said, if you will just give us the $300,000 back, we can have a pretty good program. I said, I thought you were going to close down if you didn't get the $6 million more dollars. Where would the $6 million come from? It'd come from the pockets of the average citizen of Alabama in the country. And the more money you put into a program doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better. I read a statement the other day that in New York City, they put more money in the school system than the national average, which means more than Florida, more than Pennsylvania, more than anybody. And they said they got one of the sorriest school systems in the United States. You have to have a sidearm on to protect yourself if you go into a school building. You may not get out alive. What is another thing that we are for and against? And we are for national defense and not disarming the country. We are for a change in the tax structure. I've been saying a long time about welfare. We ought to help the elderly and the blind and the tubercular and the maimed, because that's what we expected to do. And in our religious background of believing in God and country, we want to help those who are unfortunate and cannot help themselves. And thank goodness we do that. We ought to do that, and we do that. But in New York City alone, there are 1,250,000, because that's what we expected to do. And in our religious background of believing in God and country, we want to help those who are unfortunate and cannot help themselves. And thank goodness we do that. We ought to do that, and we do that. But in New York City alone, there are 1,250,000 people on welfare, more than live in the city of Houston, Texas. And when they have run spot checks, they have found people on welfare 4 times, signed up under 4 different names. They found people drawing $500 to $600 of your money that are making $1,000 a month in some other occupation. And now they won't even let you ask in some of these states anything about you. If you just go in and say, I'm in bad shape, I need help, put me on. I've always said, and say now, that if this matter is not handled, it's going to break every city and every county and every taxpayer in the United States. And when you elect me here in Florida on March 14th, you're going to tell the National Democratic Party that I'm tired of paying my hard-earned money to a bunch of welfare loafers in the sun not to work. And don't think they aren't going to get the message good and strong. Have any of them said that to you? The other candidates? They can't say it. They've been voting to give all this money to welfare. It ought to be used to solve pollution problems in big industries on a long-term loan basis where the problem is so great that an industry might have to close. Not a gift, but a loan. And it ought to be used for the elderly. And it ought to be used for national defense. Not it goes down the drain. Another thing that I've talked about a long time, and now they're coming around to getting some sense about it when it's too late. Why do we have a devalued dollar? Why do we have a wage and pay board? Because our economy has gotten in such shape that a few years ago aspirin would have cured it, but now the patient's in intensive care. Wage and price controls. Why? Because we've had deficit spending for so many years, print and press money from the Federal Reserve System, and my friends, inflation is not caused by the working man who has to get increased wages to make up for what the government does about inflation. Nor does the businessman cause it himself. The government of the United States causes inflation, and it ought to freeze itself instead of trying to freeze everybody else because it spent more money than it ought to spend. We recognize that something had to be done when action was taken by the president. There had to be some action taken, but as I said a moment ago, if they had listened to you who are here tonight, that action would not have had to be taken because it was good, sound advice. We said, quit giving money away to all these foreign countries that goes down a rat hole. We're going broke. What did the theoreticians tell you? What did the theoreticians tell you? They told you, no, the more money we give away, the richer we will get. Well, who was right? The average citizen in Jacksonville and Duval County was right. And we've given billions of dollars, $212 billion, since 1946, including interest, to every country in the world. And 3/4 of the money's gone down the drain, and part of it's in a Swiss bank, and we've given billions to countries that spit in our face and aid our enemies who are killing American servicemen in Vietnam. And the foreign aid bill the other day said $3 billion. But there's $14 billion in another bill that didn't tell you about under the military aid part of it. And there's $24 billion in the grant bill, which makes $41 billion of your money ready to be given away. And I tell you, if you vote for George Wallace, you're going to be telling the National Democratic Party and the Republicans and all the rest of them that we are tired of our hard-earned money being given to every Hottentot in the world who don't like us and spits on us in the United Nations and every other place. And I want to talk about schools, because all of us are interested in schools and quality education, and it sure does my heart good. Several years ago, I told the politicians, you better stop this takeover of the public schools by the executive branch, by the courts, and by everybody else. I was talking about federal judges years ago, and the newspapers were saying to me, you ought to be more respectful of the judges. You ought not to say what you say about the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court are made up of human beings just like I'm one, and they say things about me, and I'm elected by the people, which gives me a better spot because at least I'm a product of the people. But the Supreme Court of the United States, they ought to review them every 6 years in the Senate of the United States instead of holding for life. And these federal district judges that have more power over your child and your money and your union and your business than all the elected congressmen and legislators have and governor has, they ought to have to run for office in that district and let you vote on them here in this area. I don't tell you that my election on May 4th in Florida will bring that about. But I can tell you one thing, it'll make some Democratic politicians begin to think about it, and they'll begin to say some things they never have said before, because I'm tired of a non-entity federal judge that you wouldn't recognize if he's sitting next to you, that has more power over you and your family and child than all those I mentioned a moment ago. And it's not right, it wasn't intended by the founders of this country. And I want to tell those newspapers who say, you shouldn't talk about judges. Well, judge is not sacred or sacrosanct. He hangs his breeches on the wall. He don't hang them on the wall and jump in them every morning. They put them on one leg at a time, just like everybody here in this audience does. And I tell you what, that's what Mr. Brinkley said the other night you were tired of. People having more to do with your life and your whole business and child than you do yourself. My friends, I warned about this, but every one of these senators down here running in this primary campaign have voted over and over and over to take your children away from you, and not a single one of them has ever risen in the American Congress and defended your position one time, not one single time, not one single time. But I tell you what, all right, I'll name them. Well, my friends, I tell you what I was going to do. I have the record here on the matter of busing. Well, my friends, I have the record in my hand, and all 6 senators who are running in this race, bring it back around and let's use it again. I want you to chant it with me. All 6 senators who are in this race, and I have their congressional record in my hand, either voted to bust little children to achieve racial balance or announced in favor of it. And who are they? I got them in alphabetical order. They are Harkin, you say it with me, Harkin, Humphrey, Jackson, McCarthy, McCurlin, and Muskie. That's all of them. Now you can take it down. All 6 of these senators voted or announced against an amendment to prohibit the busing of little children to achieve racial balance. And so when any of them now come and tell you, we've changed our minds, have they changed their minds through conviction, or have they changed their minds because of the thousands upon thousands of Floridians that tell them we don't like it one bit? It's purely political expediency, that's what it is. And I have the record here. All 6 senators voted against or announced against neighborhood schools. Not 5 of them, not 1 of them, 4 to 2 or 3 to 3, 6 to nothing. Voted against neighborhood schools. On a freedom of choice amendment offered in the United States Senate, all 6 United States senators either voted against or announced against the freedom of choice amendment. On the amendment, let us treat people in Florida on the school question the same as we treat people in Michigan, and vice versa. In other words, don't pick out Florida and Alabama and the South and make them do something you do not make people do in other parts of the country. That was an amendment introduced in the Senate. My friends, on a freedom of choice amendment offered in the United States Senate, all 6 United States senators either voted against or announced against the freedom of choice amendment. On the amendment that killed the Whitten Amendment by the gentleman from Mississippi, all 6 of them voted for or announced for the amendment that killed his freedom of choice amendment. The other vote was on the Stennis Amendment. Senator Stennis is from Mississippi, and he introduced an amendment that said, let us treat people all over the country alike. Let us treat people in Florida on the school question the same as we treat people in Michigan, and vice versa. In other words, don't pick out Florida and Alabama and the South and make them do something you do not make people do in other parts of the country. That was an amendment introduced in the Senate. My friends, all 6 of the United States senators in this race, and here's their congressional record, voted against the Stennis Amendment and in effect voted to treat you differently than the way they treat people in other parts of the country. And if you don't believe this is true, you look at the record and write to a congressman and ask him to send you the record, because it's down in black and white. And you know who put the record out? Senator Mike Mansfield of the Democratic Policy Committee. And when they drew this record up, they thought that they were helping these senators by telling the people how liberal they'd been, how they'd been so fair about public schools. But now, since they got down here in Florida and found you didn't like all of this, I expect they're trying to withdraw this record from the public here in Florida because they don't want them to see it. I want to congratulate the legislature of your state, which was a matter to allow the matter of prayer, I believe prayer in schools and the matter of busing and quality education and equal education. All of us have been for that all the time. I've always been for equality of education in the sense of giving every child, regardless of their race or color, an equal opportunity to a good education. Nobody's been against that, and we've been trying to tell them for so long. And some of these writers from the New York Times and the Washington Post will say, well, have you changed your attitude? No, I haven't changed my attitude. You just didn't listen to me a few years ago. You didn't pay any attention to what I said. But now you must listen now, because I have the pleasure, honor, and privilege of heading the movement of the citizens of this state, who are telling those who are down here that we are tired of being number 2 in defense. We're tired of our money being wasted, and we're tired of us being taxed to death. My friends, this matter of busing, 50 years from now, people will look back and will say, how in the name of common sense could there have been any such program as shifting little children to kingdom come on buses, as in my state some ride 33 miles one way and 33 miles back, and 87 little black children and 7 white children ride 48 miles one way and 48 miles back. They get on the bus in the morning before daylight and get off after dark. What psychological impact does it have on a child to be on a bus all day? And when you vote for George Wallace on March the 14th, you in effect are going to tell the National Democratic Party that you better stop it yourself if it's not stopped, but here's what's going to happen. I said in Tallahassee, Florida, that if I get to running good in this campaign, Mr. Nixon's going to come out and say something about busing himself. And sure enough, they monitored my crowds in Tampa. And they monitored them down, they what? And they are monitoring this crowd now. And I tell you, when I went on March 14th, in my judgment, the present administration is going to take some action, because you're going to tell them you better straighten up and fly right, because we are sick of it and we are through with busing our little school children to kingdom come in this country. Well, I should close on that note, but I'll go just about 2 minutes further, my friends. I can tell you that I have taken the same position all the time on this issue, and it's just something that people of Florida and of the nation are tired of. And they're not only tired of it in Florida, but they're tired of it in Michigan. I conclude on the matter of law and order. Some say that's not an issue. Last year, 127 policemen were killed in this country more than any year in the history of the United States. And in the large cities of our country, you cannot walk on the streets because the courts and the judges have turned criminals loose at the rate of hundreds per day, all because they're trying to be liberal. And the crime rate has risen. And the average man who has to lock himself in his house at night, when we let a few people take over a city and you're under a curfew, then your civil liberties have been violated, because when you get out, you're a law violator. And I would say that every black and white citizen in Florida and in this country is concerned about it. And I invite all of them to support me, because another message that you will send by electing George Wallace in this state is that we are tired of the breakdown of law and order, and we want it stopped, and we want these federal judges to quit turning everybody loose and paying attention to the man who assaults instead of the one being assaulted. Because if you walk out of here tonight and are hit in the head, the person that hits you in the head is out of jail by a federal judge decree before you get in the hospital, and on Monday they'll try a policeman about it. And my friend, I stand with the police and firemen as you do, and the public had better stand with them, because they are the thin line between anarchy and safety in the street. My friends, as an average citizen, if you're fed up, don't let anybody tell you that George Wallace cannot do this or cannot win, because when you vote for someone you don't want to vote for, you're not voting your conscience. And I tell you that the average citizen who makes up the millions of people who are the majority in this country can do what they want to do, and we can, with the help of people like you, we can win, and we can straighten this country out, and we are going to win in Florida and going down to Miami. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.